Now, I got your social media feedback. I know some of you don't like the fact that I reckon Donald Trump is behaving like the Black Knight. Yes, there are more legal challenges coming. And, of course, the state of Texas is leading one bid to the Supreme Court, and a number of other states, 17, I think at last count, are joining that bid. But that's really looking at laws that were in place and voting practices long before the election. Problems that obviously we're going to focus on mail-in voting, and we talked about those on this program long before the election too. Anyway, I spoke about all this and more with the Fox News White House correspondent John Decker earlier today. John, thanks for talking to us again. I'm fascinated by the legal challenges to the election result here. This move by Texas, supported by a number of other states, really goes to these rules that were changed before the election. I'm very interested in this because I think the mail-in rules were absolutely crucial, but we knew all about this and these changes in the weeks and months leading up to the election.
Well, that's exactly right. And this is why this particular lawsuit that has been filed really at the 11th hour is so problematic. In fact, a federal district court and a federal appellate court dismissed the arguments that were made in this latest lawsuit because, as you mentioned, Chris, the rules that were in place, for instance, in Pennsylvania, were rules that were in place based upon a law that was passed by the Pennsylvania legislature in October of 2019, even before there was a coronavirus pandemic. And so the rationale for dismissing that lawsuit in both the district court level and the federal appellate court level was that lawmakers essentially waited too long. They had an opportunity, even before any election took place, to challenge these mail-in voting changes, to challenge this law, and they failed to do so. And that's why the Supreme Court is likely not going to take up this particular challenge by these 17 states.
So what's going to happen here, John? We've got President Trump as recently as yesterday saying he won. In fact, I saw him on Twitter this morning again saying he won. He's not going to concede defeat. A lot of his supporters buy those arguments and say he was robbed. How are we going to get this loser's consent handed over to Joe Biden and the Democrats? How are we going to get a concession and the American political system to go on post-inauguration with some sort of unity?
Well, I don't think you're ever going to have a concession actually coming from President Trump. Inauguration is set to take place on January the 20th, Chris, of 2021. Joe Biden will be sworn in as America's 46th president. And for the first time in well over 150 years, the outgoing president likely will not be there for the swearing in of the incoming president. I think that it's very likely that on January the 20th of next year, while Joe Biden is raising his hand, taking the oath as president, President Trump, who will be a private citizen on that day, will be far away from Washington, D.C. I think he's likely going to be leading a campaign rally on that day, maybe even announcing, Chris, that he's running for president in 2024.
Extraordinary. Meantime, there's more news on tax investigations into Hunter Biden. People saying if more had happened on this in the lead up to the election, perhaps that would have made the difference. But this, again, may or may not be true, but it's just crying over spilt milk, isn't it?
Well, to a certain extent, it is, and maybe that would have been the case. Maybe it would have changed votes in some of these very close states, like Georgia, a state in which Joe Biden won by just 12,000 votes, like Wisconsin, a state in which Joe Biden won by just 22,000 votes. But to your point, what's done is done. You can't go back and redo history. We now know today that there is an investigation. It does not necessarily point to wrongdoing, but there is an investigation into the son of Joe Biden as it relates to possible tax issues, and we'll see where that goes. But it's obviously unfortunate that this investigation is being disclosed over 6 weeks after Election Day, as opposed to making this knowledge available to voters before Election Day, and they could take that into account when they cast their vote on November the 3rd.
Yeah, absolutely. To quote the famous words of Lady Macbeth, though, what's done cannot be undone. To bed, to bed, to bed. But I don't think Donald Trump is lying down anytime soon.
I don't think so. You know, he's going to continue to challenged the results of the presidential election. He's not been successful in any court in any state that would reverse the results in any particular state. At the same time, Chris, President Trump received 74 million votes in the presidential election, and a good portion of those voters are very upset with the results of the presidential election. And if indeed President Trump announces that he's running again in 2024, he is almost certain to get the Republican nomination. It freezes the field, and it certainly keeps those supporters of his energized. You may not know this, but let me tell you, since Election Day, the Donald Trump presidential campaign, a political action committee associated with the campaign, has raised $200 million US, and all of that money can go towards a re-election effort in 4 years.
Extraordinary stuff. I did not know that. That's why we have you on, John. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Chris. Thanks for having me on today.